What physical skills do you think college coaches are looking at when they're recruiting pitchers?
I don't know. Tell me.
Before we talk about it, be sure to like and subscribe and put in the comments below what you think they're looking for before you watch the rest of the video. Be sure to stay tuned to the end of the video when we talk about probably the most important one, but also one of the most controversial ideas. So we've broken it into 3 main categories, and the first one we're going to be talking about is presence in the circle. Take it away.
So in our last video, we talked a lot about, body language and how you carry yourself and, how you react to failure, and all those things are obviously very important, especially as a pitcher. But coaches are also looking at how you carry yourself on the mound while you're out on the field. What did you say? Like she means business, that kind of vibe that you're giving off, right, when you're on the mound. So, and that could also look like, are you communicating with your defense? Are you pointing at your catcher? Are you, interacting, like I said, interacting with your team?
So if you think about pitchers like Nyjah or Carlin Pickens, right? When they get in the circle, whether you are playing against them or are watching them, you instantly know that they mean business, and it's going to be a fight to even just get a hit off of them. They have this aura around them that nobody's going to touch them. And that, to me, that's what I'm talking about with presence. So I went maybe a little above and beyond to get my presence the way I wanted to with my makeup and everything. But I also, and this was something that my pitching coach had me do, but he had me practice my walk and my pitching routine in the mirror. And so I could see exactly how I was carrying myself. I could see my facial expression. I could see, tempo, everything. And so I could really make sure it was exactly how I wanted it, and I could do it over and over and over again. And then I would practice it in different mental states. So I'd get myself really, really excited and really, really happy, and it still had to look the same. And then I'd get myself really, really mad or annoyed, and I'd have to go practice and it'd have to look the same. It's that aura around you in the circle. Think about how that affects how hitters approach you. And maybe you're feeling good, but if you walk kind of small, hitters are going to pick up on that, and they're going to feel like they have a little more of an advantage on you. But if you walk big and you have that presence about you, that swagger, it changes the hitter's mindset just a little bit. But we are looking for every possible advantage we can get.
And it doesn't need to be a loud presence either, necessarily. There's pitchers that are a little bit more neutral or maybe cool, but it's still, because you have pitchers that are yelling and getting excited, then you have some that are more calm, but there is still again that swagger, that yeah, I own you kind of presence, that confidence, and it doesn't waver. It's not an up and down thing. This is something that stays consistent. And it goes with body language. After you give up a hit, do you completely lose that? If so, then that's not your aura or your, it needs to be consistent.
And it's not just that we want the hitters to have that, just a little bit of a pause, or maybe a little bit of that intimidation factor, but it's also really important that our team doesn't recognize that we're maybe frustrated or we're feeling disappointed in ourselves. We split this into 3 categories of what coaches are actually grading pitchers on, but it's also really important to make sure that you know how to field your position and throw. You are an infielder. We just talked about this last week. So just make sure you're staying on top of that.
The next thing that coaches are looking at is whether or not you have command over your pitches. So this isn't just, I can throw inside and outside, but can you throw inside and up and jam a hitter on their hands? Do you know when to throw a pitch at a certain height or getting it off the plate, or do you have control over doing those things?
It is a mental adjustment for the pitcher,
mm-hmm.
but for the coach, that's a tangible thing that they can see and grade a pitcher on. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So it depends on what perspective you're looking at it from. But from a college recruiting, a recruiter's standpoint, that's a physical, tangible thing that they can measure.
It's not sometimes you see pitchers overdoing it, where they have an 0-2, 1-2 count, then they throw a pitch that's way in the other batter's box. That's not showing that mental side of the strategy and knowing, okay, let's see if we can get this hitter to bite. That's a complete waste of a pitch. That's not what we're talking about. It's, throwing it 2 balls off the plate and seeing if you can get a bite, not like an obvious ball. Like we don't want to waste. Like there's no such thing as like a waste pitch. Like there's ones that you can
Oh my
dump,
God,
like dumping a
I
changeup.
hate that
Yeah,
term
that's
so much.
yes. Like we don't do waste pitches. Every pitch is thrown with intent. So
And a purpose.
yes,
And a
like
goal.
it's like I would throw changeups in the dirt where it's or like right in front of home plate, and I would get hitters out on it. So like that, but that's a very intentional pitch. I'm not rolling it there, or I'm not like my curveball in an 0-2 count isn't intentionally. You know, sometimes it might get away from me, but intentionally, I'm not trying to throw it all the way in the other batter's box, right? Like we want to have a purpose behind our pitches. So when we say the command, I just wanted to throw that in there. Waste pitches are not a thing. Thank you.
Well, and that is pretty much what I was going to say is like, this is where like one of the aspects where throwing becomes pitching, right? Where you have a purpose, like you're saying, you have a purpose behind your pitch. You're not just throwing pitches because that's what your coach called, right? You know exactly what you're trying to do with this pitch and you're able to do it, you know, most of the time. We're all human. It's never going to be perfect, right? But if we're at that like 75 to 80% mark, and I don't care what age you're at, I literally just had a discussion with one of my pitchers yesterday because their coach was like, you need to hit 100% of your changeups. I was like, dude, you're not a robot. You're a human. It's never going to be like, maybe you have a set and you get lucky, but on average, it's never going to be that high. Like 80% is elite level command. Anyway, back to the topic, right? This is where throwing becomes pitching. So exactly like you said, but that's like, and to me, this is where it gets really fun.
Yep.
Now it's not like checkers anymore, it's chess. And our third point, definitely going to be the most controversial, especially among coaches out there. If you want to be truly elite, you do not need to have 37 different pitches. Plain and simple. You do not need to know how to throw a fastball and a drop ball, which are the same pitch, 3 changeups, a rise ball, and a curve ball and a backdoor curve are the same pitch thrown on a different line. That's all it is. So you can have one curve ball, and you also don't need to have a screwball. If you look at the best of the best pitchers throughout the history of college softball, and if you go to baseball also, you typically see that each of these pitchers have 2 mastered pitches and an off speed. Or maybe one of their mastered pitches is their off speed, and so they rely pretty much on 2 pitches. Like Nicole, you will throw your best pitches, especially if you have 2 like mastered moving pitches and an off speed, you're going to throw those probably 90% of the time. Everything else you throw is just for show. And the reason that is because nobody's going to beat your good stuff. You don't need to have more tools to get batters out if you have the best rise ball in the country. Plain and simple. There's literally only one pitcher that I know of. Well, potentially 2, but I never saw Lisa Fernandez pitch enough to really know how she spread out her pitches, how much she threw each of her pitches. So I don't know about her. She might be the other exception to the rule, but the only one I know of who, and even then, she primarily threw a rise ball. That was her best pitch, but she threw a pretty good mix of everything, and that was Finch. She was the only one. But even then, I would still say like she was primarily rise ball, curve ball, changeup. In the long time that I've been in the game, I don't know of another pitcher who has had that even of a spread.
I think a lot of people might have expected this last one to be speed. How fast can you throw the ball?
Oh, yeah.
And we've talked about before, like every pitcher has their own thing. There's going to be fast pitchers. There's going to be pitchers that throw slower but spin the heck out of the ball and have a lot of movement. Coaches aren't just looking for speed. And I think a lot of softball coaches push that on their players. It's like, you need to increase your speed. You need to do this. It's like, you don't need to do that. If you have, like you said, like the good command, you can hit your spots. You have 2 mastered pitches and a good off speed. You're fine. It's just complete BS because if any of you watch the College World Series, you see that not every pitcher throws 70 plus miles an hour and they're still there and doing well. So you don't need to be throwing 74 miles an hour to go to college or to get looks.
Going on speed, I don't care if you're throwing 74. If you don't have movement on the ball and you can't place it, that ball is never landing when you make contact.
Yeah.
You have to have the other tools and you have to change speeds. Top speed, it's super flashy. It looks good, but hitters can time it. It doesn't matter what speed it is, hitters can time it. The like gold standard, right, that a lot of coaches I don't want to say coaches look for it, but it is kind of the gold standard when we think about what combination of pitches is going to be the hardest to hit, and it's going to be up, down, change. Or maybe you're down pitching your changeup for the same pitch, right? But like if we think about how your pitches went together, you had a rise and a change. And for a week, you had a drop ball.
It was a fun week.
That is like the gold standard because it's the hardest to hit against, because you either have to sit one or the other. But that doesn't mean that you can't be a really, really successful pitcher being an east-west pitcher. It all comes down to what you are naturally best at, and you live on that. Because like, you know, there's a lot of coaches who are like, no, I'm only going to call rise and drop because that's the best. Like, no, if your pitcher's rise doesn't work, but they have a great curveball, you're doing everybody a disservice. Just because it doesn't match with your ideal doesn't mean it's a bad like combination of pitches, right? Everybody's combination of pitches is going to look different than everybody else's. You have to call pitches and work with them and what they have.
Capitalize on what they're good at.
100%.
Don't turn them into a pitcher that they're not. Plain and simple. And it's hard to do that, especially when you have youth pitchers looking up to players that are in college or playing pro, because you're like, oh, I want to be like them. That, I mean, we've talked about before, the beauty of pitching is like every pitcher is different, and like you don't need to be like another pitcher. Like I grew up and people were like, oh, who's the pitcher that you looked up to? And I'm like, I didn't really have one. Like I just didn't.
Me either.
There was never a pitcher where I was like, I want to be like her, you know?
Same.
Like you can gain inspiration. You can say, yeah, that's a good pitcher, but like, you know, I don't know.
You got to be yourself.
Yep.
And you got to figure out who that is. And you're going to constantly figure out who you are throughout your whole career. And that might change. And that's okay. Right? We are always growing and changing as people. And we're always going to grow and change as players and pitchers. Coaches, you don't need to push your players or your pitchers to have 7 different pitches. Let them master a couple because it's going to help everybody.
We'll do another video on that.
So when you're out playing this fall and you're thinking about getting recruited, remember these things, right? Presence in the circle, command of your pitches, knowing how to pitch and not just throwing what your coach calls, and really relying on the pitches that you've mastered. You don't need 1,000 different pitches for coaches to consider you good. Know your strengths and really just like keep going after hitters with those, because that's how you're going to be most successful.
Less is more. Consistency is good.
Ask questions in the comments if you want clarification on anything, but I promise if you rely on these 3 things, you're going to put your best foot forward.
Bye. Toodles.